Hey everybody from Beantown to your town. This is the Beantown Beatdown. I'm Matthew Barris, and this is
Gabe Shamus here, also from Beantown.
that's right. And this is actually the new and improved Beantown Beatdown.
Exactly.
We've always been audio, so now you can see our faces. That's right. So we welcome those who are looking at our face for the first time, or for those who are looking at us or listening to us for the first time, because we're also going to be trying to upload it to iTunes.
Exactly, yes.
And lots been going on since, during the Christmas vacation, of course. Lots been going on. Pats are in the playoffs.
Awesome.
Pats are in the playoffs. There's the Jon Jones controversy we're going to get into. And, of course, according to Calvin Klein, Justin Bieber has been dubbed the new Marky Mark. So, of course, normally on the show, if you've been following us, we normally drink beer on the show. Because I'm on a New Year's resolution diet and under strict orders from my mom, thanks a lot, I am not allowed to have alcohol for a while. So that's a real bitch. But Gabe can drink, so...
So, yeah, I'm going to open into some Heineken over here. And, we've done more fruit type beers, but since I'm the only one, I get to have some actual beer.
Yeah.
You're gonna cheers with my energy drink here.
Yeah, sure.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Wow, this whippet is pretty good.
It's not bad, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't mind if I have this?
You can have the rest. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I'm definitely gonna maybe buy this more, but not too often because again, the diet.
Right.
So let's get into it. First and foremost, the Jon Jones controversy. Jon Jones won his fight against Daniel Cormier. Great fight. Excellent match. I mean, he really did put a whooping on Daniel Cormier. He actually took Daniel Cormier down. Yeah, he actually managed to take down an Olympic wrestler like four times. Because going into the fight, I was like, okay, Jon Jones is great at grappling too. He's a wrestler, but he's gonna want to keep this fight standing up on his feet because Daniel Cormier is an Olympic wrestler, and when you're going up against a grappler who's in the Olympics, whether it's wrestling or whether it's judo, you got to rethink the whole game plan. Yeah, you got to rethink the whole game plan.
Totally.
But he did manage to take him down. He won the fight by decision, and of course he tested positive for cocaine afterwards. And because of the positive test for cocaine, he is now in rehab. Currently, right now, he's in rehab, and it's still going to count as a win. I mean, if it was like marijuana or steroids, they would rule it a no contest.
Right.
And they would probably have stripped him of his title. I mean, of course, the jury's still out on that, if his belt will be stripped or not.
Right. I was wondering about that because, I mean, there's been so much about steroids. There's been, of course, Lance Armstrong and the doping thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that Lance Armstrong was like a huge figurehead that, was very important to the sport and made the sport what it is. And now he's not going to have the title. So, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where I can understand it's not technically performance enhancing or whatever, but it is something that completely changes the game. So I wonder why they're not making that decision.
Yeah, I know, but hopefully it'll work out good for Jon. I mean, I'm not pointing fingers at the guy. I mean, I think he's just he's like 27 years old. He's right around my age. So I think, just being in the UFC, typical athlete period, getting caught up and what have you. So, but hopefully he can make a change. And trust me, if there's one thing I've learned from watching Dr. Phil and Dr. Drew all these years is that, fighting addiction is not a sprint, people. It's a marathon. So hopefully he'll come out on top in this one.
Right.
Also, saw some boxing last night. Jay-Z's the Throne boxing on Fox Sports 1.
I just heard the other day that he started promoting. So
yep, he just started promoting. Signed a deal with Fox Sports 1, and the first night it was excellent. 3 big fights from top to bottom. It was great. The first fight it ended in TKO because the one fighter he had twisted his knee and couldn't come out for the round and couldn't fight anymore. And he was actually losing. He was actually losing the fight too, and it was a really exciting fight. And went down twice. The second fight was by this guy. His nickname is White Tiger because he has like tattoos of tiger stripes on his left arm.
Mm-hmm.
And he was actually making his pro debut in Madison Square Garden, the theater at Madison Square Garden, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And won his fight. Great way to make a debut. You know, I first saw him, I was like, oh, good-looking kid, all right, because he's pretty, you know, he's a pretty boy, but can he fight? Mm-hmm. And the second round, he got a TKO. He was just like banging away at the body, you know, like a young Ray Boom Boom Mancini, you know, just bam, bam, bam. And the referee eventually had to call it off, and I was like, oh, that's good, you know, good-looking kid, you know,
and
but he can fight.
Also has the spunk, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, the more fights he wins, hopefully he'll be in line for a title shot. And also, in the main event, Dustin Hernandez Harrison, he won his fight. A young welterweight prospect. He's 25-0. Haven't really heard much about him. Maybe, you know, with more fights and more exposure, he can probably get close to a title shot. And it was, all in all, it was a good night. Gus Johnson was doing commentary as well. Gus Johnson, for those of you who don't know, he does commentary for college basketball, specifically the Big East basketball on Fox Sports 1. Kind of got a bad rep when doing MMA when he did like Strikeforce and Elite XC for a while, because he would go in to interview the fighters after a match, and he had like no enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. You know, people are like, because like in college basketball, he's like, you know, he's fantastic. You know, he's fanatic. He's energized, and
right.
And the other one, it's just like there's nothing there with him. Mm-hmm. You know, he's no Joe Rogan. But all in all, it was a good fight, and also the rapper Fabulous was there, performed 4 songs after the first 2 fights.
Really? Wow.
Well, yeah, because Fabulous is signed to Rock Nation by Jay-Z.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So rock the house as usual. Of course, if you're a longtime rap fan like me, you know, you're a fan of Fabulous. You know, I've seen what he can do. And also, a lot of Jay-Z's friends were in the audience that night, too. Mm-hmm. Rihanna was there.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, Rihanna's there? Damn.
Yeah.
She was actually sitting next to Jake Gyllenhaal, too.
Rihanna and Jake Gyllenhaal.
That's crazy. Jake Gyllenhaal has a boxing movie coming out called Southpaw.
Yeah,
that's right. Coming out pretty soon. And originally, Eminem was going to star in that movie, but Eminem was focused more on, but he got into the drug thing, was going through rehab, and then he got back to making music, so he didn't have time to make the movie.
Okay.
And also in the audience was Andre Ward, WBA super middleweight champion, who actually just signed with Rock Nation Sports. So, you know, he's possibly going to be fighting in May or June. That's what he said. Also, there was a guy from the New York Yankees there. I forget his name. But also, in case you're wondering, yes, Jay-Z was there too.
Of course.
Well, of course, you know, the promoter and stuff. You know, how can you not have Jay-Z there? Mm-hmm. And good night of fights, and no, I didn't see Beyonce either.
I was about to say, was Beyonce, his wife there is the question.
No, I didn't say be there. You know, she's probably at home with Blue Ivy. So, but it was a good night of fights. Hopefully this will be, there'll be more good fights to come, you know, from Rock Nation, and Hove, keep up the good work.
Yeah. Can I ask you? So you say you're a longtime rap fan as well. So as a rap fan and as a fight fan, like, you know, what's there usually was no overlap between those. Am I
right? Sort of. I mean, when Mike Tyson kind of came on the scene,
right? There's that.
You know, with Mike Tyson, you know, when he, you know, started coming into like Public Enemy, and he would come into Tupac and. And, you know, Method Man and DMX and stuff. And also you have Roy Jones Jr., who cut a few rap albums himself. And he was actually a pretty good rapper, too. I've heard him rap.
Yeah.
He was pretty good.
So you don't see this as much of a difference that...
no, you know, plus...
There's more... Like, someone to me, it seems like there's a lot more rap people involved in fighting now.
Yeah, you know, plus it's like when fighters are walking out to the ring, that rap music kind of pumps you up.
Right, I can imagine.
Yeah, and sometimes they actually have rappers, you know, walk to the ring with the fighters and rap their songs. You know, Lil Wayne has done that dozens of times now with Floyd Mayweather. Raekwon from Wu-Tang Clan, he did that for a Peter Quillen fight.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that must really pump you up. That must be like freaking awesome to have the actual artist behind you.
Yeah, and Adrian Broner, he's had rappers too. He's had Rick Ross, Rich Hood from Cash Money there. He also had French Montana walk out with him too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's rap, music, and fighting. They go together.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And also another headline: UFC is coming to Boston next Sunday, January the 18th. Conor McGregor versus Dennis Seaver. Mm-hmm. Conor McGregor is like 4-0 in the UFC. He's a good featherweight prospect. In fact, I heard Dana White this past week on UFC Tonight say that if McGregor wins this fight, he's going to get a title shot with Jose Aldo for the featherweight title. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, like even people that do not know about fighting have known about this. You see this on so many ads around here in Boston.
Well, yeah, and Boston is it's a very good fight town itself. With especially when you got with the Irish Americans and yeah. So trust me, on that night,
the Italian Americans too.
Italian
Americans, they throw a punch.
Yeah, the Italian Americans, the Irish Americans. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you one thing, man. That night, because also McGregor's fought here in Boston too, and there were tons of Irish people there.
Yeah.
And on this night, on that night, there's going to be tons of drunk Irish American guys just being like, yeah, kick his bloody ass, yeah, yeah, do it.
I'm sure they'll sound just like that too.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So that's definitely a good night of fights. And also the day before that, Deontay Wilder is fighting for the WBC heavyweight championship, which is held by a guy I can't remember. He's Haitian, but that fight's going to be on Showtime. And Deontay Wilder is like 32-0, and this is his first title shot. I don't know who his promoter is or his manager is, but he needs to be fired. You should be having a title shot by the time you're 21-0. But he's a good prospect fighter. He's definitely what the heavyweight division in boxing needs. Vladimir Klitschko is kind of course, he's recognized as the real world champion because he has most belts. He has the WBA, the IBF, and WBO, and the Ring Magazine title. But Klitschko really hasn't been bringing in pay-per-view sales, or not many people have been wanting to watch him fight. In fact, the only thing he's got going for him is that he's fucking Hayden Panettiere, who, by the way, they just had a baby, too.
Did they really?
Yeah, they just had a baby. They have a little daughter, and she's a mean mix. I mean, because she's half Italian and half Russian.
Oh, yes. They're not going to want to mess with her.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. So, best believe the winner of this fight is definitely going to get a shot at Klitschko. And if Wilder and Klitschko fight, I'm definitely going to watch it. Hopefully it's a pay-per-view. Even if it's pay-per-view, I'll watch it. Though I highly doubt it because Klitschko, nobody's been wanting to pay to see Klitschko fight in years. That's why he's been taken off pay-per-view. Yeah, they're having his fights free on HBO. So that's it. And now we're going to go into our second segment called Blast from the Past. Mm-hmm. We actually had for those of you who listened to our show earlier in years, months, we had a segment called Fighter of the Day, but we have another segment we replaced it with. More on that later. Mm-hmm. But here's our segment, Blast from the Past, where we talk about good fights from the past. And one fight we're going to be looking at is the fight between Hector Macho Camacho and Ray Boom Boom Mancini. This fight took place on March 6, 1989. Also, interesting fact, Riddick Bowe fought on the undercard of this fight. Yeah, young Riddick Bowe, before he became heavyweight champion, he fought a cab driver.
You fought a cab driver.
Well, cab driver. That's another way of saying like a bum or someone who's not really that good of a fighter.
Okay.
Camacho. This was for the vacant WBO junior welterweight title. Mancini was coming out of retirement. His last fight was like in '85 in a rematch against Livingston Bramble that he lost. He lost 2 straight fights to Bramble. And then he comes out of retirement 4 years later to fight Camacho because that was the fight people had wanted to see. They wanted to see him and Camacho fight.
Right.
And it was a pretty close fight, in Reno, Nevada. It was a pretty good close fight. And eventually Camacho won by a split decision. Yeah, Hector Camacho won that fight. And I actually saw that fight on an old VHS tape. Too, yeah, and that because it was on an old VHS tape, and on the same VHS tape in the beginning, it was Mike Tyson's fight against Frank Bruno in 1989. So that was and then the Camacho fight was like a month later, and Camacho was definitely at his prime, and for Mancini, like that, you could tell that wasn't the same Ray Boo Boo Mancini. I mean, Mancini by that time, his skills had diminished, and plus he was out for 4 years. But he was a great champion back in the day. A former WBA lightweight champion. The Dooku Kim fight kind of mentally destroyed him too, because that was the fight where Dooku Kim got killed accidentally.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, because because that fight was like in '82, I believe. Yeah, it was in '82. Actually, November 13th, 1982. And those were the 15-round days.
Right.
And it was actually, I think, one of the last 15-round fights they had, and because like Dooku Kim and Ray Boo Boo Mancini took a hell of a beating, and then Mancini finally dropped him, and then in the 15th, and then Dooku Kim later died. He was in a coma, and eventually they pulled the plug.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and mentally it did kind of it fucked with him for a while. I think it got to him. He says that I've seen him in interviews. He says that it was a great win, but everything afterwards was bad. And plus there was he was also going into commercials and stuff. There was talks of a cereal and advertisement people, they like sunny, happy things.
Right.
And to have a person, even though it was accidental, a killer on there, it was like, that was bad for business.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. And Mancini also, he's also, by the way, he's from Youngstown, Ohio, which is Ed O'Neill's from there.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Ed O'Neill, Ed Bundy himself, and yeah, and Ed Bundy is actually a fan of Mancini too. And of course, after that, I think like 3 years later, 3 years later, Mancini came out of retirement again, took on Greg Hagen. He got knocked out, TKO'd in that fight, and then he went back into retirement. He never fought again. Went into acting. He had some acting roles. He was actually in Red Belt, MMA movie that came out a few years ago, and yeah. So now he does acting. He does a lot of speaking engagements and stuff like that. So he's living well. As for Camacho, he went on to fight. Kept on fighting and stuff. Of course, he lost some big time matches. Losing to Chavez and eventually De La Hoya, and continued on fighting, and then until eventually dying a couple of years back. But it was still a great fight. And actually, when Camacho died, a little while after Camacho died, ESPN they had his fights on demand, on the Classic Boxing on Demand, and I recorded his old fights. He this fight in particular. Yeah, the fight with Camacho, the fights with Greg Hagen, the fights with our own New England guy, Vinny Paz. So, and Camacho was really one of my favorite fighters, back in the day. He had a swagger about him. He was, good-looking Puerto Rican kid. He had swagger. Matter of fact, one time, he called one of his fighters, I forget his name, he called him a girl, and actually sent him panties. He actually sent him a pair of panties to fuck with him.
I was about to say, if his panties worn by, a girl they like, that could have been a present. But
But Camacho was definitely a showman. He was, absolutely one of the best fighters actually one of the best Puerto Rican fighters too. In fact, the day that he died, because he died on my birthday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember on my birthday I was with my friend Prema, and we were at the Cheesecake Factory, and there was a waitress who was Puerto Rican. And I said, hey, one of my favorite fighters was Puerto Rican, Hector Macho Camacho. And she goes, oh, yeah, my father used to watch him all the time. And I said, yeah, man, he was one of the best. And, along with Felix Trinidad, too, another great Puerto Rican fighter. So, I miss Camacho, man, and also the way he used to come out to the ring and go, it's Macho time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, and, definitely one of the old-time greats, and, this is a good fight. Look it up on YouTube if you ever get the chance.
Yeah, so wait, who did he fight again?
Ray Boom Boom Mancini.
Boom Boom, yeah.
Yeah, Ray Boom Boom Mancini. And, and Mancini, he's done well for himself, too. He's still around, and another one of the great ambassadors of boxing as well. And also another one of the great little men of boxing at the time, because in the 80s, the little guys took over, until Tyson came on the scene around 85, 86. But in the early 80s, it was the Arguellos, the Pryors, Leonards, Haglers, Durans, Hearns, Mancini, Camacho. It was the era of the little guys. The little guy, the welterweights, the middleweights, the featherweights, they took over in that decade of boxing. So, great fight. Look it up if you ever get a chance on YouTube. Awesome. And now it's time for my rant of the day. And also, he has a rant as well.
Yes, that's our new change, is that we're both doing rants of the day now.
Yeah. Now, this rant is about CM Punk. CM Punk, of course, has left the WWE. Since then, has signed with the UFC. A lot of buzz on when his first fight is. Some people have actually called him out. Nate Diaz sort of called him out, although he was more complaining about, him coming in and getting a deal and taking away opportunity from fighters and blah, 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 blah. A lot of that going on, and people are, whenever there's a former pro wrestler who ever gets into MMA or is thinking about it, and there's always, the question is becoming like, is mixed martial arts starting to become pro wrestling? And I got the answer for this. From an entertainment perspective, entertainment, not fighting, entertainment, yes it is, but it's a good thing. Because if you look at what wrestling used to do, any promotion, WWE, NWA, ECW, take your pick, the way they used to promote a fight, they're not kind of doing nowadays. MMA is kind of borrowing from it. The sport, and all the wrestling tricks and stuff, and they actually did that for a while in Pride too. They like Kazushi Sakuraba, he would come out in a Japanese pro wrestling mask. Yeah, actually, there's actually also, if you go on YouTube, there's actually one where he came to the ring dressed as Super Mario.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, it's Japan, so Nintendo's pretty big.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and Rampage Jackson did that for Pride too. Yeah, and actually there's one Mexican fighter in the UFC that comes out to a Mexican wrestling mask, luchador. Yeah, luchador. Yes. And, and I like that, because, pro wrestling and MMA, they're two different worlds, but the thing they have in common is selling tickets and getting asses in the seats. And, if MMA can use it better than pro wrestling, the tactics they use, like the Stephen Bonner, Tito Ortiz thing, when they announced the fight and Bonner took off the guy's mask and it turned out to be Justin McCauley, Tito's former training partner. When I saw that, I was like, that is absolutely pro wrestling. I was like, that's great. I liked it. And even now with Bellator, when they had their fight and they had the new entrance, like the screen, and like the one part of the screen would like come up and the fighters would come out. Right. That's great. That's also good.
Yeah, it's definitely more theatrical, more it gets you pumped up.
Yeah, exactly. And
that type of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, even in some MMA fighters, they were pro wrestling. Some of them were pro wrestling fans back in the day, and they're still pro wrestling fans. Tito Ortiz, huge Hulk Hogan fan.
Mm.
King Muhammad Lawal, huge Ric Flair fan. That's why when you see him come out to the ring with the girls and the shiny silver, robe, that's Ric Flair.
Mm.
He's a Ric Flair fan. Also pro wrestling is big in pop culture. Period. Like I was watching ESPN's First Take, and they were talking about Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless, who debate sports subjects and stuff. Mm-hmm. They were talking about the Packers-Cowboys game. By the way, go Cowboys. Because I want the Cowboys and the Pats in the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And Stephen A. Smith was talking about who's the quarterback for the Packers? Brett. Aaron Rodgers.
Okay,
yeah. And he was talking about, well, listen, I'm going to use an old wrestling technique here. Y'all some wrestling fans, right? Because they were doing the show live in Texas.
Right.
They said, to use the old Ric Flair analogy, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Mm. Woo!
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, yeah, and everybody was doing the Ric Flair woo thing, the Ric Flair chant. Yeah.
Chant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, whenever Ric Flair does the woo, like the crowd gets into it too.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
But that shows you the significance of pro wrestling and pop culture. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it works well in fighting, because you need to promote a fight and create the spectacle around it to make people want to watch it. Now, time will tell if CM Punk can actually fight. I mean, personally, I believe he can fight because he has a background in Kempo Karate, and he has been studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's like, CM Punk is no pushover. Mm-hmm. He's no pushover. I do believe, and plus he has been in real fights in real life, although there were street fights.
Right.
So it's like, trust me, the guy knows how to fight. But will it translate into the octagon? We'll have to wait and see. Whether it's good or bad, I think it's still good because, it brings the UFC more publicity and, it gets people watching the fights more. And if it's good, hey, we could have another Brock Lesnar on our hands. And also look at Bobby Lashley, who's fighting February 13th on Bellator. Mm-hmm. He's doing pro wrestling and MMA at the same time. So, it could work out well. What do you think?
That's actually one of the things I was going to talk about as well, is how this is getting pretty enmeshed in regular pop culture and whatnot. I do think that part of pro wrestling's power is that it was so theatrical and whatever you want to call it, it's, pumped up and a spectacle, and that's great. I think that it's I think that it, as you said, it is a good idea. I know that there are reasons that fans of UFC specifically will say that it's that it should be about the fight, but I think the more like pumped up you can get about it, the more freaking into it you can get, and something that gets people on their feet in the audience. That's awesome,
Yeah. And, my brother Wayne, hey Wayne, what's going on?
Right.
He even talked about it too during the Bonner Ortiz fight. He was like, oh, it's becoming pro wrestling. I said, oh, come on, man. But from an athletic point of view, it's not going to be pro wrestling, okay? You're not going to be seeing steel chairs. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be seeing, people jumping off the octagon and landing elbows and... Mm-hmm. And knee drops, okay? And you're not going to be seeing, well, you are going to see girls shaking their ass and showing their tits, but that's going to be the ring card girls. Oh, God. Oh, yeah. And so, I mean, is it becoming pro wrestling? Yeah, from an entertainment prospect, from an entertainment point of view. Right. But at the end of the day, the name on the marquee is fighting. Mm-hmm. It's still a fighting sport.
Right.
People. So for all you haters out there, suck it. In the words of my two favorite pro wrestlers back in the day, Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Suck it. And I don't know. Were you a wrestling fan back in the day? Or?
No, not really. But I did hear a lot about the pro wrestling stuff because I was pretty much surrounded by pro wrestling fans, and I was in middle school at the time, and so I knew about The Rock before he got into movies. Let's just put it that way. That's what a lot of people have to say nowadays. And a friend of mine were actually talking about that, how it's kind of unfortunate that younger people are no longer gonna understand. You smell what The Rock's cooking,
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, but of course the WWE. Well, of course they can probably look it up now with the WWE Network now,
right?
But yeah, I also remember The Rock as well. I mean, The Rock went from the University of Miami, great football player, actually was replaced by Warren Sapp, if you can believe it. He went from that, and when he came into the WWE, being booed as Rocky Maivia, people chanting "Die, Rocky, die," and Rocky sucks, to Nation of Domination, to where he is now, it's phenomenal.
Right.
Definitely phenomenal.
Yeah, and then let's see, I knew enough about Jericho to actually get his name right, and we did trivia games and stuff back in the day. And
Chris Jericho. Yeah, yeah. Jericho's done well for himself too. With the band Fozzy and getting into a little bit of acting and doing. He actually has a podcast now. Talk is Jericho. So he's still pretty good. So this also will lead into your rant of the day.
Exactly.
So what's your rant?
All right. So like I said, my rant is kind of similar. I'm going to talk about how regular pop culture or regular entertainment has from the other side has regular entertainment getting more of a taste of wrestling, and I think that it definitely is. We mentioned the whole Friends episode of the UFC back in the day.
The one with Tank Abbott.
Exactly, yeah. And so that was for fans like him, that was a very different experience. But for me, that was one of my first looks into what UFC was actually about. So, I'm one of those people that definitely only heard about it through, other media like that. So that was, I'm sure, an important moment to fans and stuff. And yeah, that it's all over sitcoms and stuff right now. I think New Girl had a thing about them going to a wrestling show or something, and I was just the other day, I've been watching a lot more shows on Hulu, and there's now this commercial about how people discover different shows on Hulu, and one of them is this guy talking about how he now looks up all the old WWE stuff on Hulu as well, and it's very interesting because he doesn't look like your typical wrestling fan either. He's no offense to him. I coming from me, it's actually a compliment that he looks very gay, actually. And he's got the blonde hair and hard to describe, but anyway. So, and like we talked about before, there are even if he is, there are a bunch of gay fans as well. So yeah, the fact that it's that it's on these commercials for Hulu, that that is more and more regular entertainment shows, that even I've been watching some old 90s cartoons as well, and I love Hey Arnold. I'm just gonna say it, and even in Hey Arnold, there's a whole thing of Helga wanting to go to the wrestling show, and so yeah, I think it's definitely out there. It's definitely good, and I don't know, I don't know exactly if it's being fully understood the way you and your fans understand it, but through this other media, this other entertainment, but it's definitely being heard about and talked about, and like I said, even people that don't know about fights and wrestling here in Boston will see these posters for the upcoming fight, and So it's pretty good. One of the things I'm also going to talk about is just a little idea of how the outside world, shall we say, sort of views the fight world. And, I think that there's a lot that they don't understand. I think there's a lot they're starting to understand. The question that comes up, I think, a lot is about, what does this say about violence in our culture? And one of our first episode, we talked rant of the day. It was about violence, and you make very good points that that we shouldn't be afraid of TV violence, and that it's
we call it Hollywood violence. Yeah,
Hollywood violence, yes, exactly. So you make very good points that we shouldn't be afraid of Hollywood violence, and I think that there is a point to be made that we should be more honest about that there's going to be violence in sports, and this whole thing that we're discovering about concussions and whatnot in football, I don't think we should be afraid of it, but I do think we should be honest about it.
Yeah.
And so, that includes being honest about what it actually is. And so, as much as I really respect everything and how much you've followed this in your life, and everyone out there, all you fans, the same thing. There's a part of me as an outsider that wonders if this is not a bit too similar to the gladiator days. I'm going to bring a very kind of controversial point into this, is that we sort of saw it as very uncivilized back in Roman times, that we would send these men that had no opportunity, that were a lot of them were slaves, but whatever. We send them out and have them fight to the death for our amusement. Of course, that's not at all similar to what we're doing now, but at the same time, these guys have real injuries. You talked about this guy accidentally died from the concussion. From the concussion caused by this fight. So again, we try and avoid that nowadays, and it's there's a much better training, and these guys know what they're getting into. But it's that people that are concerned about television violence and whatever, perhaps overly concerned. I do agree with that, but it seems like we should be asking the tough questions here, and that's one of them. Is this not sort of like the gladiator days? And we think we're above those. We think we've moved on, and that we're more civilized now. But the fact that we still are so glued to this idea of watching these guys sometimes really actually hurt each other. What do you think about that?
Well, here's my thing. Well, as you mentioned before, the gladiators back then, they were slaves.
Yes.
Yeah, they were slaves, and they were forced to.
They didn't have a choice. Yeah.
Yeah, and and as much and as civilized as we are now, but we look back. Some of us who are fight fans, we specifically men, we look back at those gladiators days as somewhat of a good time, because it was because men, we've always been bred as the warriors, the hunters. I mean, yes, we're a little more intelligent now, especially in what is now being deemed as the pussification of America. And
here we go.
Oh, we're gonna get a lot of hate mail for this. But we live off that shock value of gladiators and stuff like that.
Right.
Even I could prefer the fighters today, gladiators. But I see it as
is there some honor in that?
Well, there is an honor in it. Because it's like you're warriors, they're strong, you're doing something that nobody else can do. You doing something nobody else can do.
Right.
And and plus, with the violence thing, to me, yes, it is a very violent sport. And I said this in our first podcast, is that,
Right.
Sports violence is like a fire, but it's a controlled fire. Okay? It is a controlled fire. It never gets out of hand. You know, because if you have a fire an uncontrolled fire would be like a fight on the streets. You know, like you have a bonfire and then you pour like gasoline or some alcohol and then all of a sudden,
Yes.
You know, with the referees and the state athletic commissions, you know, across America, which is the government, they keep the fire from not being out of control.
Right.
You know, just enough where it's bright and it sparks, but not enough to where it gets out of control. And, you know, and it's like I said, you know, the real world violence is something we in the world should have to pay more attention to.
Right.
You know, especially right now, you know, with our soldiers just getting out of Iraq, although some of them are still staying over there to oversee some stuff and possibly fix things. And, you know, and with the ISIS thing that's going on, that is more important.
Right.
You know, that's the violence that people should be concerned about than more about little Timmy and little Susie watching two men or two women in a ring or cage, you know, fighting each other.
Right, exactly.
You know,
and I do believe that it's more this. Well, it's not just more honest. It's more honest to like, you know, acknowledge that there's a part of you that really wants to watch that and wants to release that. I think it's also very important, and I mean, like, we do have that. I don't want to say primitive side, but maybe we have that that side, like you said, that goes back to the old warrior days. There's a side of us that still wants that, and you know, I'm sure a lot of us as men feel like we've lost that as well. You know, you know, and even me, I have this, you know, sort of, you could say, judgmental view, but I was not the same, and I did not feel that I really could stand up for myself until I got punched in the face. After I got punched in the face, everything was different. And, you know, again, that was, I think I told you on this podcast before, that was actually an accident in a kickboxing class that was supposed to be non-combat. But, you know, after that, I felt like anything anyone could threaten me with would not be enough to keep me a coward, and that's very important. So there's a place for it, and if we really were honest about our psyche or whatever, like, we would understand that that's really important and we need it. So again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have this in society, and maybe we should have more of it.
Yeah, but there's always going to be some kind of negative connotations and stuff like that. Like, for example, like. Well, as you can see my hair now, I would rock a mohawk. I'm actually thinking about bringing it back.
Yeah.
Nothing's set in stone yet, Mom. So, Mom, don't worry.
Don't freak out.
Yeah, but I would have a mohawk, and there were times when I would have UFC written on the side of it.
Oh.
And strangers would come up to me, and they'd be like, "Oh, UFC? Yeah, we like that UFC." And I'd be like, "Yeah, man, it's good." And I was talking to my social worker at the time, my social worker now.
Yeah.
And she says, like, well, if you're trying to go out with dates, when they see the mohawk and they see UFC, to the people who are not into it, some of them may look at it and go, oh, that's barbaric fighting. He's probably into that, or he's dangerous, you know. And once again, it leads back to what I said earlier, you know, about you know, this whole thing of fighting and stuff like that. I mean, of course, to most of America, it's well accepted and stuff, especially with all the sponsors and the publicity UFC's been getting.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just the fact that today it's the pussification of America. You know, and I mean, and Joe Rogan talked about this too on his podcast. He says, like, the pussification of America, there are some good stuff to it because you have to learn how to live in society, you have to learn how to
cooperate.
Yeah, cooperate and other stuff. But it's to the point where it's like, you know, the everybody gets a trophy thing. I'm not a big fan of that. Or the, you know, the football players, you know, they can't dance in the end zone. You know, they can't talk trash. You know, they can't swear. and actually in some colleges, and I heard about this too.
Mm-hmm.
Some colleges are actually taking out amateur wrestling programs.
Mm.
Yeah, one college they talked about. I forget the name of it, but Joe Rogan brought it up on his podcast when he had an MMA fighter and his trainer with him. He said like the school, they're taking wrestling out of the program for dance. And I like dancing. I mean, Michael Jackson, one of my favorite artists, and I got into dancing because of him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like to take out of wrestling, because wrestling is supposed to teach you grit, and all that stuff, and it's like you're replacing wrestling for dancing. It's like, what the fuck?
Right. So I do not agree with a lot of that. I think like I said, I think that there is something that really needs to be expressed here, and to pretend that it doesn't exist, that's an even bigger problem, really. And so I don't agree with any of that, but yeah, I don't know. I think it is important that we are getting more cooperative and more accepting of each other. So I mean, it's a sort of balancing act, I guess. I do take exception to the pussification word, but that's me.
Sorry. Hey, well, that's what I mean. That's what they call it. I don't mean like as in turning people gay or anything like that. And I know some women
or misogynist.
Yeah, misogynist, but it is sort of a thing, and also
right. But I mean, yeah, if we're too if we're too afraid or too protective, I think that's what it comes down to as well. Like parents are far too protective a lot of times. This whole thing of putting up rubber barriers and playgrounds and taking out the sand and that type of stuff is really stupid and dangerous, actually, because how are kids gonna deal with real world problems when they come up later?
Yeah, and and as far as what America should be, it's like it shouldn't be. I think there should be like an equal balance. Like, yeah, boys should also be into some art, some music, and even though it may not be the music that grown ups like, but they are listening to some type of music.
Right.
But also at the same time, it'd be nice if they got into a little bit of sports. And stuff like that. A little bit of sports, and and being more like guys and stuff like that. But there has to be like an equal balance.
Equal balance, yeah. Because like I feel like there's a lot of focus on getting girls into sports, and that's great. That's really important. And a lot of girls will tell you that they really like sports, and and are hungry for it, and they wouldn't have survived as well, I'm guessing, in an earlier time when they were discouraged from that stuff. But that's one side of the equation. You should get more girls into sports and more girls a little bit more violent, let's say, or whatever, however you want to call it. But yeah, the other side is guys should know how to be cooperative, how to appreciate art, and etc.
Yeah, and the whole thing with nerds, I mean, like. Because the thing is, like, but of course now, when you're an adult now, it's like, the whole bullying thing, like people say, like, when they bully the nerds and stuff, and then the bullies realize that all the top corporations are run by the nerds, and they're like, oh crap, it's
right,
like
exactly.
the guy that I used to stuff in a locker is now my boss.
Right.
Those type of guys.
It's true. That's actually a really true paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, the men, I'm all for education, too. I mean, you don't have to be the nerdist guy. You don't have to be a nerd or anything. If you are, that's fine. But, I mean, I was somewhat of a nerd, but yet I wasn't really smart. I mean, I didn't get on the honor roll till, like, my last 2 years of high school.
Right.
So, but you have to have some sort of education. You have to have some kind of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But also, sports, getting into sports, and stuff. It's like it teaches you how to be like one of the guys watching sports, and also you do learn grit. You learn grit.
Right.
How to, like I had a therapist one time. He got into football. He said like, I wasn't pretty good at football, but it taught me determination. It taught me how to be part of a team.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
trust me, people. Just because you play football, whether high school or college, doesn't mean you're gonna go into the NFL.
Right.
Okay, so, but the whole violence thing and how America sees violence and stuff. I mean, like I said, you break it up into category. I break it up into three categories. There's Hollywood violence, there's sports violence, and there's real world violence.
Right.
And you have to put things in. You have to put things in perspective. Little Timmy and little Susie should not be. They should not be concerned about the Hollywood violence and the sports violence because one is entertainment and one is regulated.
Right.
Okay,
Controlled.
it's controlled. But what's going on over in ISIS, the ghettos, anywhere USA, and that stuff. That's the violence we really need to be worried about.
Yes.
And plus, our parents are always telling us to pick our battles, right?
Yeah.
You always, son, pick your battles, and it's like,
Exactly.
okay, but what are you doing now?
Right.
You're not picking your battles.
Right. Or you're picking, not a great one.
Yeah, I guess I should. I guess I should say pick your. Well, I always say this too. It's like pick your battles, but pick your battles wisely.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
choose wisely.
Exactly. So I agree that the whole thing, we've got to get the violence off of television. I basically grew up that way. My family does believe that, but at the same time, it's like they don't go out and pick it. The way oversensitive, mostly Christian parents do. Like I think. Yeah. It's they got to be more realistic than that. And like you said, what's our bigger priority? It should be trying to stop this real world violence.
Yeah, and also focus more on little Timmy and little Susie's grades too.
Right, exactly.
And also, I also mentioned this in the first podcast. I think kids should go to a Hollywood set, for field trips, because that way. When they go see these movies and stuff, they'll be like, okay, we know that's all smoke and mirrors. It's in stuff.
Right. You can get an understanding that this isn't real. How they can make this look real, but it's actually fake, and that's really important for kids too.
Yeah. Maybe your parents should have done that with you when you were a kid. Be like, okay, we're gonna go all the way to Los Angeles. You're gonna see how this is, and and then you'll know, and they'll probably would have let you watch more violent stuff.
Well, yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it with an analogy. I'm a huge fan of Star Trek. If we eventually, maybe I'll have. I can't even do that. But yes, eventually I'll have my own podcast about Star Trek. And the things that this reminds me of is that there's the Vulcans and there's the Klingons, and then there's a lot of other races in between. And, the Klingons, they do bloodletting ceremonies and very violent things as part of the coming of age ceremony, and other commonplace ceremonies are just completely violent by our standards, but it's really important for them and it's part of their culture. And then, the Vulcans say that you have to completely detach from your emotions, and, your emotions are the problem, and et cetera, et cetera. And we're more evolved than that. Well, I think we are more evolved than that, but the problem is ignoring something that's really important as well. So I think we need to learn from the Klingons out there and from the Vulcans, and try and find more middle ground, like the Federation does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good Star Trek analogy.
Thank you.
So we're gonna end it here.
Yep.
Tune in next Saturday for our show. Actually, I was actually supposed to do a special edition show on boxing about unsung heroes. I think we can do that next weekend.
Okay. We can do that.
Yeah, we can do that. I got a whole list of. This is a list of boxers and champions who never really reached their prime. I'm not gonna tell you say all of who's on the list or who's number one, but I will say this: yes, Jerry Cooney is on the list.
Gotcha.
Jerry Cooney is on there.
All right. Well,
from
Beantown to your town.
This is the Beantown Beatdown, and until then, Vios con Dios.